Whizz put on his best magician's robe and sauntered into town. On his way, he walked over a hill. On top, standing under a tree, were two very frightened men. "What's the matter?" asked Whizz. "We're worried," said one, quivering. "Very worried," said the other, shivering. "See that apple?" said the first, pointing to the only apple in the tree. "Yes," said Whizz. "Well, what if there was a dreadful snowstorm?" said the man. "With a strong wind," said the second. "The apple would blow off the tree," said the first. "And roll down the hill," continued the second. "And as it rolled, it would make a huge snowball. And what if a small girl was standing in its way, wearing a thick balaclava so she couldn't hear anything, and it squashed her?" concluded the second. They looked at each other and burst into tears. It would be so terrible, they sobbed together. "Yes," said Whizz, "but what if it didn't snow? After all, it is the middle of August. And anyway," he said, picking the apple and biting it. "What apple?" At this, they turned to him and said, "What do you know?" Then they walked off. Whizz carried on. "That's definitely one case of the Silly-Willies," he muttered to himself. Suddenly, from inside a house, he heard thump, 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 crash. Ow! Whizz knocked and went inside. In the bedroom upstairs was a man who had hung his trousers on a chest of drawers. He was trying to put them on by running up and jumping into them, but each time he crashed into the drawers, banging his knees painfully. "Why don't you step into them and pull them up with your hands?" said Whizz. "What do you know?" said the man rudely. "You don't even wear trousers. Now, if you'll excuse me." As Whizz left, he heard thump, 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 crash, ow. That was another case of the Silly-Willies, and he found lots more that day. As Whizz was returning that night, he saw some people standing around the town pond, murmuring. "What's the matter?" said Whizz. "The moon's fallen into the pond," said a woman, pointing into the pond at a reflection of the moon. "That's only its reflection," said Whizz. "What do you know, smarty pants?" she said. "I'll show you," he replied. He took a stick and stirred up the surface of the water, shattering the reflection into a million rippling fragments. "He's broken the moon," shouted a man. "Get him," said another. They chased Whizz all the way back to the castle. That night he told King Dominic all about his findings. "What can we do?" said the king. "Well," began Whizz, "the Silly-Willies get into people's bedrooms through keyholes. If everyone blocks them up, they'll move on somewhere else. As they aren't in the castle, you needn't bother." The king issued a proclamation, and everybody blocked their bedroom keyhole. Next day, there were no cases of the Silly-Willies anywhere in the town. That night, Whizz was ready to move on. "I can't thank you enough," said the king. Then, as Whizz trotted off on his horse, he added, "But where are the Silly-Willies now?" "Who knows?" replied the magician. "The Silly-Willies come and go like the wind. They could be anywhere, absolutely anywhere.